Hello and welcome to Insight Live. I'm Jason Rader, your host, and today we'll be talking about a new approach to networking, network as a service. And with me, we've got some awesome folks that are going to help with the conversation. Sometimes host, sometimes subject matter expert, Mike Moore, Senior Manager, Infrastructure Portfolio. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Jason.
And always effervescent and the grand poobah, Kent Christensen, who is Practice Director with us here at Insight. Welcome, Kent.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you throwing in the grand poobah part.
So for the uninitiated, I mean, we talk a lot about as a service type things. We've never talked about network as a service. What does that mean?
It's a great question. And I know we've got Mr. Christensen here, who's the X as a service expert. So he's going to dive into some of the intricacies as well, but I'll lead on to some of the network. Yeah, exactly. So we'll play a little stump the chump between Kent and I. So network as a service, kind of late to the market when we look at other as a service offerings. A lot of that because we're looking at a hardware component. So a lot of organizations are trying to figure out how they can get the outcomes in the network environment without having to do all the grunt work and to focus on CapEx and big purchases up front. So because of the hardware component, it did come a little bit later. As we talk about more as a service solutions, a lot of it's software that's coming out. So there was a little bit more challenges to figure out how our partners could do that, how managed services partners could work with different OEMs to bring that to bear for our clients. And I'm glad to say it's now here because we're getting asked for options at how we can get these types of environments into our clients' business and how it can support them.
Just to zero in on that just a bit, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're focused primarily on the access layer of network as a service versus the core data center network as a service. Do you want to help
the audience
understand the difference there?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more focus when you hear NAS or network as a service. I mean, it's going to be your switching infrastructure, your wireless infrastructure, your traditional route switch, even SD-WAN options. We're even starting to see some security baked into that, like network access control. So a lot of the partners we work with are providing really modular solutions for us to work with. But yeah, it is at that branch and that campus layer, not necessarily within the data center where we're looking at the top of rack switches or the big data center switches that we have that are doing all the IO and processing and compute for our applications. Yeah, we're specifically talking about how we're onboarding our end users, whether they're wireless, whether they're directly connected, all the IoT devices in our environment. And again, yeah, campus branch is going to be the primary use case for that.
Interesting. So, I mean, you just brought up IoT, because I was thinking of this primarily as the catalyst or maybe end of life into support type stuff. But the IoT actually sounds like maybe a full-fledged expansion from a capabilities perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the access layer is really the new edge. I mean, we talk about the edge being anywhere we have to connect an endpoint, a device, could be a camera, could be a sensor, could be a wireless user. Could be talking applications and in the cloud, and that kind of transcends the NAS conversation. But anywhere that we're providing that access to our enterprise network where we need to make some kind of policy decision, we need to make sure we're putting devices that are in place in that environment where we're, one, able to apply policy to those devices, and two, provide them the best experience that they can. So depending on what type of IoT device we're putting in or what type of endpoint, whether it's a laptop or a PC, we need to make sure the infrastructure is optimized to support all those different use cases. And NAS allows us to do that by working with our clients, figuring out what those different use cases are in their environment, what outcomes they're really trying to achieve by leveraging infrastructure to do the day-to-day business that they have. And that's why looking at NAS solutions where we can get in there, help the clients build the solutions, get the right hardware, get the right software, and wrap that with a layer of services can be really beneficial to help with those different initiatives, including IoT.
Nice.
So one of the things, Jason, is I see what's been happening over the lifestyle, because it's not the first time we've talked about X as a service, right?
Right.
It kind of started in the data center, and it actually started with storage. This is where the data ends up, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, compute needs to talk to storage. And so all of a sudden compute was added. Now network with 1A as a service was added after that, because people are like, wait a minute, I need to update some switches, top of rack, all of the data center infrastructure. Now we're moving out from that safe data center environment where people are like, okay, how do I take these workloads? Do I run them in my data center? Do I run them in the cloud? Do I run them in as a service? And as Mike is articulating, the access layer, where's all the data coming from? It's coming from edge environments, remote offices, people logging in, whether it's a coffee shop or I'm in a remote office right now. And that's the access layer that we're focusing on. So I can consider this network as a service is network access as a service, 2 A's, or maybe 3 that is.
Yeah. And so, not trying to deviate from the focus on the network access as a service, but it sounds like now with kind of the maturation of the way that as a service is available that you just talked about, Kent, it sounds like now we could basically, these aren't isolated. You don't have to do one and then you can have a solution that includes all of this together. So now it sounds like a full solution can come to play with the full as a service capabilities. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, since we started talking about this, and it was a new topic a year and a half ago, right? And most clients didn't understand. They thought I either buy things, take care of them, put them in my data center, right? Or I go to the cloud. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I can consume like the cloud, but I don't have to own it. I don't have to manage it, right? And so that started to make sense in the data center. And many of those clients and dozens of clients that have started to adopt this and say, okay, what about my compute? What about my network? Are actually saying, what about my remote sites, right? And this is before, ChatGPT made, oh my gosh, IoT, and where's my data going to come from? Probably not in my data center, right? And so they've been asking and we're curious about this. And so now, really network access as a service is pretty new because the providers of that had to buy into this strategy. And it does make sense in that the data center had all these subject matter experts that could run it, although they would a lot of times ask us. But when you're in your remote sites, you probably don't have that expertise. So as a service makes more sense, not just as a financial model, but as I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to manage it. I don't want to take care of it.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about that and all the different components that our partners are providing in this space, I mean, whether it's in cloud, data center, at the network level at this point, I kind of think of it like the different subscriptions I have, and I won't name all of them that are hitting my credit cards right now, but you could think like just from video streaming service like Paramount Plus and Hulu and Prime Video. So they all have different aspects, different functions that they do. So as more of these as a service options are coming to market for our partners, they're still working to figure out how those are all going to integrate and work better together. So you get that comprehensive as a service. We can do it really well as a partner, managed service partner, to aggregate that and make it very seamless for clients. But a lot of times it's going to be a la carte purchases. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but I mean, if you're getting one subscription model from cloud versus data center, maybe one's compute, one's storage, maybe you're doing the data center networking, network as a service, those could all be from different areas of the organization. So having a partner that's able to wrap services around that and bring it together as one holistic thing to our clients is super powerful. And I would say that a lot of the partners we work with, the ones who have cloud management for a lot of their devices, whether it's the data center or the network as a service, are light years ahead, because we're starting to see a lot more integrations where we can get that consolidated feel when it comes to consuming X as a service across the entirety of the business.
Yeah, that makes total sense. If you're referring to the ability to help us manage the client's environment using a cloud management layer, a key. Because where the cloud really always made sense is I need to get to multiple locations across the country, around the globe, right? While the cloud can see all those locations. As you take network access and it's not in a data center that you have control over, et cetera, and it's in your 52 branches or whatever, having a management console in each one of those doesn't make any sense. So it does make sense that we act as a cloud to our clients. Mike was kind of talking about that. We can see the data center, we can see the sites, we can help you manage that holistically. And then we leverage our partners' tools that say, hey, I can see my device through my cloud management thing, and I'm feeding that into Insight that's helping the customer manage the entirety.
That's awesome. So I know we've talked about it before in other as a service, but so why consume from an OpEx perspective versus buy from a CapEx perspective? Why are we still having that conversation?
Why do they want to do consume versus OpEx? Well, in reality, that's what all they could do before. So if you rewind 5 years, you either bought it and owned it and managed it, or you went to a public cloud who says, look, you can use my computers instead, right? And those were really your only two options. So when the consumption model came in, for most organizations, it was fairly new. Now in storage, where this started, we could go in and say, look, storage has multiple tiers and you probably aren't distributed on the right tiers and you're over provisioned and blah, blah, blah. And we could actually just look at it and say, look, if you look at this as a subscription, so we use Mike's example of we subscribe to, different services, but instead of buying albums now, we're just buying the music we want, mixing it up exactly the way we want it. And it's much more efficient, right? You go through almost everything you deal with. And as they started thinking about how I do infrastructure or how I do have the things to run my key applications, looking at it differently was very beneficial. And so the reason why everybody didn't do it right away, because a lot of organizations are like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I like buying albums and putting them in a rack and playing, one song and then flipping and then they start to learn. And so we're in an evolution. I still think that as a service is in its early innings. But what we're seeing at Insight is many large and small, but especially large, are starting to take a sophisticated look at this and say, you know what, I want to consume this as a service. It aligns to my cloud strategy. It aligns to my business strategy. I basically have expenses ramping with demand and things like that. So it's an evolution that people are starting to get more comfortable with.
Yeah. And I think one thing I have to add from a security perspective, because that's my job, is, a lot of people, the paradigm was, oh, well, if I own it and buy it, then it's more secure because it's under my control. But we've pretty much proven from a cloud perspective that having less of a responsibility of the lower, layers of this and just basically consuming the services that are offered is a better strategy when you've got somebody helping you from a managed perspective, dealing with the nuts and bolts of it, where you basically get to be, consume the service that you actually are looking for.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I'll add back on the previous question about why the OpEx versus CapEx. And I mean, as we look in the network space, and I mean, same in the data center, I mean, when you're looking at a CapEx expenditure, you're typically following a refresh cycle, and NAS would be no exception to that. I mean, typically the number one driver for moving to network as a service is your network needs refreshed. You have legacy hardware, you've had it in the environment 5, 7, 10 years. If you're really sweating the assets, where they're getting on the end of support, end of life side of the house. So you're looking to move to new infrastructure for starters, and your business is more OpEx prone. So if you're already starting to consume SaaS-based applications, you're moving to OpEx when it comes to data center and cloud. It makes sense that the organization is already having the appetite to move to an as-a-service model. So it could be a natural transgression for you to move or transition to network as a service, because you're looking for that predictability and cost. And one thing with network as a service, just like the other as-a-services, there's going to be contracts involved. 3 to 5 years is pretty common with a lot of our partners. And what's really great with as a service, when you're going through that planning cycle and budget for IT for refresh, you know exactly what your cost is going to be on a month-by-month basis. You don't have to plan 5, 7 years in advance what the budget's going to be, what kind of macroeconomic environmentals are going to cause supply chain shortages, or the cost of chipsets and particular hardware. So when you move to an as-a-service model and you get locked into that contract, you get basically guaranteed pricing for the term of the contract. So for 3 to 5 years, if you need to scale up your environment, you typically have a rate card that says, I need 1 new access point. It's going to cost me an extra $20 a month. Hypothetical number, throwing that out there. Don't quote me on $20. But I mean, that kind of assurance is really hard to get in a CapEx model. You don't know what it's going to look like in 3, 5, 7 years.
We were just talking about today that everything's gone up like 8%. We've got to work that into the budget. So that's
well, that's a good point. I think, the whole concept of being able to control transparent pricing, which is now on the internet. Thank you, Michael. So the fact that you have more control over your costs in alignment to your business model is awesome. But Jason, you did go back to the core of it's all about security. I think you hit on accidentally maybe two important things. One, is it more secure to do as a service or less secure? I think a lot of people think, and we all thought that when we gave up control of things, we would lose control, right? And so, first of all, when we say as a service, a lot of people go to us and say, oh, okay, well, if it's as a service, where's your data center insight, right? And we need to understand that we're bringing the service to you. So the infrastructure, there will be hardware that will come to you, especially in NAS. It's going to go into the remote sites, just like if you bought it, right? And then you get to the security part. And a lot of people think, well, cloud will never get hacked. But sometimes when they think the cloud is going to do all this stuff for me, which is why they went to the cloud, they forgot that you still have to do the things like secure it and stuff like that. So in the consumption model as a service, the equipment will come to you. And if you choose to, you can touch it, manage it, and do it all you want, right? And so it's just as secure as you ever were, except for you can have us overlooking it and saying, hey, you might want to do this, you might want to do that. Did you realize this is on? Hey, we saw this is happening. So you're no less secure than you were in a physical environment as though you bought it. You certainly can be more secure by having another layer helping you look at it.
Very valid. I think, one of the things you just made me think about is, network access as a service, cool. But, if that's not your game, that's not a game I want to be. So acquiring the capability is one thing, but I also don't want to manage it, so I think adding that value of that Insight could put together is not just to be able to leverage it from an OpEx perspective, but to also wrap the full management aspects, of the solution as well, which is, I think, adds additional value.
And one observation, Michael, dig into the why access as a service managed. But, when we started this, one of the things we intentionally didn't do to do anything as a service was say, we need to change your operations in order for you to consume it as a service. We didn't say, forget how you manage your infrastructure today, throw that all out. We're going to change everything. And how would you like it as a service? Instead, we said we can bring it as a service, and to your people managing the infrastructure, they won't know the difference. So if you chose to, you could do that. What we have seen over the last 18 months is more and more people saying, especially because we manage it very efficiently and at a very low cost compared to others, they're like, okay, I don't want my people messing around with access switches or provisioning storage or figuring out servers. Would you do that for me if it's only 10% more, whatever that number is? I guess that's on the internet. And we are just seeing a massive uptick, maybe not in the first order, maybe not in the first thought, but definitely 60, 70% of our clients, even on storage and servers, are going, hey, I'd like you to look at managing this or becoming part of my team. That's what we really are doing. We're not replacing anybody. We're just saying, hey, we're there with you, helping your environment run efficiently.
Well, managing remote offices has always been problematic. You know what I'm saying? I think that this is a key solution for folks who are kind of dealing with that situation.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's so many devices out in the environment when it comes to network. I mean, from the switches, the wireless LAN controllers, routings, APs. So porting over configuration when you're going through refresh is a big process. So, I mean, when you're working with an as a service partner like Insight, that's where we can come in and help you design to best practice, figure out what the right platforms are going to be within the environment, get those implemented. So to your point, it's really a hands-off environment from an infrastructure perspective. You get the golden figs, you get them implemented, you can put them under management or even co-management. I mean, there's flexibility where we can just provide reactive monitoring, where we'll monitor 24/7, 365 days a year and say, hey, these are the things we're seeing. And by the way, with NAS, you get a customer delivery manager, experience manager that works with your specific account to really go over KPIs, SLAs on a monthly, quarterly basis to figure out how the network's performing, if we're seeing any trends over utilization of specific links, if we're seeing any alerts from specific devices, or even if the latest software has come out to address specific security vulnerabilities within the environment. So making sure that we're getting both reactive and proactive management of the environment, so you don't really expose yourself to any unnecessary risk, or you're having complications in the network that you may not be aware of. So you have a partner that's bringing those types of problems up right away. So you're able to focus on other things from a architect or engineering perspective. And I mean, I've been working with Cisco technologies and various networking technologies since 2004, and having that kind of assurance when I was spending 80 hours a week on call as a field engineer, I would love to have someone kind of eyes in the sky looking at all those and say, hey, this is what we see. We've already done some basic troubleshooting. This is what we think the issue is. And then work hand in hand with that partner to resolve those issues. So huge benefit from kind of automating what's going on from a network perspective, where those architect level resources can really focus on other areas of the business, especially since refresh is usually a continuing cycle. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, which we've all heard that one as soon as you, for a lot of our large customers. So you start refresh, and it could take us a year, it could take us 2 years to get all the way through the environment, or you're already starting to look at the next latest and greatest hardware. You're having to do software updates on stuff that you've already implemented. So it can be very challenging. That's why working with a partner and as a service motion can really streamline that.
It hits home here. I'm sitting in one of our larger remote offices up in Minneapolis, right? It supports 100 plus 200 people, right? We have Teams rooms, we have WebEx rooms, we have a wireless network, we have a lab, etc. If something went wrong, nobody here knows what to do. Nobody designed the network, nobody set this up, etc. Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody go, hey, you're about to do a very important LinkedIn Live, and your network is not up to 100%. You may want to wire in or something like that. That's huge, right? Because, you know, having somebody oversee when nobody in this office is worried about the network, et cetera, until it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think just on the vulnerability management aspects, I mean, that pays a huge amount of dividends, having somebody help you out. I mean, again, that was kind of what I was talking about, just abstracting the whole ownership of the device, you know, and just let people use use it for the intended use, as opposed to all of the additional overhead of keeping something up, keeping it running, right, keeping it secure.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, you went back to your, why did people not do that? Well, they were used to going to the store, buying their stuff, installing it themselves, managing it themselves, et cetera. And then, you know, when you start to talk a site like this, well, the guy who did all that isn't here. So he's not here watching it. And if something, you know, has a funny light on it, there's nobody here that says, was that the way it was intended to work? And so I think, you know, it takes a while to realize that some things are better done, not DIY, but, you know, as a service managed, et cetera.
Totally. Guys, I mean, I like to finish up with kind of like words of motivation or where to start or those kinds of things. What are we thinking?
I'll go ahead and start, and I'll let Ken bring it home. So, I mean, I mentioned before that if you're thinking about going as a service, network as a service, or network access as a service, as Ken likes to call it, the AAA. I mean, a lot of it's going to start with some type of event, and typically it's going to be refresh. We also see it with M&A, or if you're expanding rapidly within the organization to bring on new sites quickly. The great thing with as a service is you can scale up very quickly, and you have that price guarantee that we kind of talked about before when it comes to rate cards around the devices that you're implementing. So once you get kind of that standardization and the golden config, golden device type across the entire environment, really easy to scale up, which is great. One thing I would say for as a service that is also a benefit, you do get that 365 24/7 support. So a little bit more hassle-free, worry-free for the engineering community as well as the business, because you know things are going to be working. You're going to have reactive and proactive type of approach around the entire network. But also when it comes to moving away from the CapEx expense. Typically when you're doing a big CapEx purchase and you're going through and replacing all these sites, now you have a bunch of end of support, end of life devices that you have to do something with. And that's on you to get rid of them, or if you work with a partner. I mean, that's part of the as a service. And a lot of times our partners will actually take that hardware back, give you the latest and greatest hardware, adjust rate cards accordingly based off of the new device types, new terms of the contracts, things like that. But you don't have to worry about the asset disposal. And a lot of times it's going to be a more sustainable option for the partners to take back their gear and repurpose it and put it into someone else's environment, or use it for education and training purposes, or reuse parts in next gen devices. So it really is a life cycle play. So it's not just moving from the CapEx motion to the OpEx. You're really getting the full life cycle suite of services when you're looking for NAS type solution.
Great point.
I think Mike started by exactly the right thing. It's a compelling event. He named refresh, et cetera. So Jason, as we've been going through, people are starting to realize, if I want to understand this new thing as a service, Insight seems to have a pretty good handle of it across all the infrastructure types and all the partners. And we can go and talk to enterprise clients and talk about what as a service. And it's very interesting to them. Wow, this is really cool. What Mike hit on was, if you have a compelling event, that could be a refresh. I have to deploy these remote offices. I'm trying to figure out how to bring AI data in from the edge. Those are all compelling events where you have a decision to make. That's the time to explore it, because it'll get real. And so when you have a challenge like that, bring it forward. Let us see how we can help. And that's when this becomes really valuable.
Love it. And I love the thing that you kind of pointed out as well, is that it's not only one partner. We've got an array of partners that we can work with to put a solution together on this, which is, again, that gives you that flexibility to put a full solution together, which is exciting. What you don't get, if you just go to a vendor to try to do the bake off yourself or do those things, you're not necessarily going to be able to get the same kind of flexibility that somebody like Insight can bring to bear, which is another good reason to talk to these folks. Well, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you guys out there for watching and commenting and participating in what we do. If you want to learn more about what we do and see all that stuff that Kent talked about, Mike put on the internet, please come and visit us at solutions.insight.com. Thanks for joining us. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jason. Thanks again.
Heather pops in, Heather pops out.
She's not sure she wants to.
All that.
Oh, we're still going. Bye, everyone. And we're still going.
Have a great